Hey, greetings everyone. Gleekon here again with another episode of Lore of Warcraft. Stay a while and listen to this one. We're going to do chapter 24 in Beyond the Dark Portal, which is the novelization of the expansion to the second game. And we're right near in the end game type of stuff. So last time we read a setup in Chronicles of the attack on the Black Temple, of how it will ultimately be futile and is going to lead to the sundering, the ripping apart of Draenor, why it looks the way it looks in Burning Crusade expansion, and a couple other things. So let's see how it goes in this version, if we can get through the whole thing, or if this is a long mega chapter, or maybe it's going to be like something they break down into a couple parts. All right, here we go, chapter 24. "Oh, lads!" Turalyon glanced up, surprised. It was overcast, and a shape had just dropped out of the heavy clouds, plummeting through the dark sky. The shout was all that stopped Illyria and her rangers from loosing arrows at the descending figure, and prevented Turalyon from ordering his men into defensive positions. Instead, he stepped back and waited, hands at his side, a small smile on his lips as Skyrie spread her wings and swooped in for a landing. Kurgan was already climbing down from Skyrie's back while her talons were still digging into the earth, and strode up to Turalyon where he and Illyria and Khadgar waited. Turalyon's pleasure at seeing the dwarf was dampened, however, by the dwarf's stiff, slow gait, and changed to confusion by the strange hunched figure that dismounted and scurried after him.
"Ah, I'm glad to see you all,"
Kurgan said, clasping hands with Turalyon and Khadgar in turn and kissing Illyria's hand.
"And a near thing too, for those green beasts captured me, they did."
Turalyon frowned and studied his short friend. "I'm glad you escaped."
"Nay, rescued I was and healed up right proper,"
Gurdren corrected.
"The lad Danath sprung me, and stormed their great ruin to boot, called Auchindoun it were. Found ourselves a strange-looking friend there, who might teach even ye a thing or two about healing with the light. Good thing, too. I wasn't at my best."
Turalyon looked with fresh admiration at his friend. What Kurgan had said amounted to a confession of being at death's door. "I'm glad," he said fervently.
You'll nae be so glad about the next part. Ner'zhul got away. He and his pet Death Knight cast a spell that took him straight to a place called the Black Temple, and we couldn't have stopped them."
Turalyon sighed and placed his hand on Kurgan's shoulder. "Don't worry, Kurgan. I know you and Danath did your best. I'm grateful you're all right." He ran a hand through his hair, thinking. "Black Temple sounds ominous. What do we know about it?"
"Nae much, but yon feathered creature here will take us to it."
Kurgan jerked a thumb at the figure who had accompanied him atop Skyrie. It bowed obsequiously.
"This is Grizik. He led Danath into Auchindoun, and then Danath found his way to me."
"Grizik knows,"
it stated, its voice high and reedy.
"I tell you of Black Temple. I know what and where."
"Is this your benefactor?" Illyria asked. "The one who healed you?"
Nay, that's a Draenei. It does get complicated."
"Then what are you?" Illyria asked softly, and Turalyon realized her elven eyes had pierced the shadows of the heavy cowl that hid Grizik's face.
"I, Arakoa,"
Grizik answered, flinging back his cowl, and Turalyon tried not to start at the stranger's long beak and feathered hair.
"We born of this world, as are orcs. Long have Arakoa kept to ourselves. Little have we to do with orcs or Draenei. Then orcs rose up, banding together, forming horde, slaughtered Draenei."
"Auchindoun was a Draenei burial city,"
Gurdren explained.
"So Grizik's told me."
"And Black Temple there's as well,"
Grizik added.
"though it was not called that then. There Draenei made their last stand, and then my brethren and I too came to fight orcs."
His eyes glittered with what Turalyon took for rage, though there seemed something malicious in them as well.
"We failed, though not from lack of arms. Orcs have sorcerer Gul'dan. He very strong, He altered Earth itself, raising great volcano in our midst.
Now his small eyes clearly blazed with anger. Gul'dan. Eh? Khadgar swung the sack from his shoulder, opened it and pulled out the skull. Khadgar. Here's all that's left of him. He won't be causing you any more trouble, the young old mage told the Eriko before dropping the skull back inside with a quickly concealed look of relief. So in Chronicles, they did explain that Gul'dan and Turalyon them made it this far back through teleportation. So I guess maybe we're insinuating that. Grizzic's eyes were wide.
You slow, Gul'dan?
He asked, his voice a breathy whisper. No, Turalyon admitted. Someone else got to him first. We have destroyed the Hoard's power and broken one of its major strongholds. Now we just need to reach the Black Temple, find Najul, and kill him as well. The Arakoa bobbed his head.
I can show you way,
he assured them. Turalyon caught Kurdran's eye and the Wildhammer leader shrugged. Turalyon understood. The clever dwarf wasn't sure whether to trust Grizzic either, but what choice did they have? Thank you, he told the Arakoa. We welcome your help. He turned to Kurdran. We'll drop a rough map tonight based on Grizzic's information, he said. Tomorrow I want you to head back to Danath. We'll decide where to meet up for the final assault. Kurdran nodded.
Aye, lad, that's a fine plan, he agreed. Now who's got ale for me and some food? Once I'm refreshed, I'll tell you the full of our trek and the battle at Auchindoun.
Turalyon smiled. I can't wait to hear it, he told the dwarf. And it was true. He caught Illyria's eye and smiled as she slipped her hand into his. Tomorrow they would begin the march again, but for tonight at least, they could sit and drink and listen to the Wildhammer's no doubt colorful tale. Several days later they rode between two low mountain ranges and saw a wide valley stretching out before them. Kurdran had found them when they were almost level with what Turalyon now knew the orcs called Hellfire's Citadel in the Dark Portal. Grizzic had led them far farther south and then east, skirting the waters the Arakoa had told them were called the Devouring Sea. There at the very edge of the land stood the Black Temple, where the Shadowmoon Valley ran up against the mountains that dropped off into the raging sea. And it was there that Danath and the rest of the Alliance army were waiting for them. Danath and the others had not been idle, Turalyon saw as he reined in. A crude but effective camp stood near the southwest edge of the valley, and thick log walls were already half erected around it. Alright, so I guess what happened was Kurdran flew up north to go meet up with them, and then they marched their way through, whereas in Chronicles they teleported.
Kurdran's idea, Danath said as he approached them, clasping Turalyon's hand in greeting. He felt we needed a place where we could keep an eye on things across the valley, and this struck us as both as a good vantage point.
Turalyon nodded. It was indeed that. From there they could see all the way across to the land's edge, including the massive volcano rising up in the center, and billowing smoke and ash and lava in every direction. I wonder if this is the little camp at the beginning of Shadowmoon Valley, where the Wildhammer, or whatever they call it, something like that. Wildhammer Stronghold or something.
Aye, and it's best it was someone as didn't need to set foot on that ground,
Kurdran added as he joined them.
That lava's green, if you cannot tell from here, and the very ground's saturated with it.
Khadgar nodded, and Turalyon noticed the pained expression on his friend's face.
Fell magic, he whispered hoarsely. The purest I've ever seen.
The Archmage shook his head.
I don't even want to know what sort of spells Gul'dan worked to cause this. It's a violation of nature itself. No wonder this world is dying.
He frowned at Kurdran.
Keep your people as far from that thing as possible, he warned, and don't enter the valley any more than necessary. Oh, aye, we'll steer well clear, Kurdran assured him. The good news, though, is that we've already scouted the valley for you.
He produced a roll of parchment and showed them the map he'd sketched out.
The Black Temple be there at the far east end, he said, gesturing toward where a massive dark structure could be clearly seen across the valley. And there's no easy way out from it either, except in through this valley. It's a big horseshoe it is, and its open end points this way.
Any sign of Najul? Illyria asked.
Aye, he's there, Kurdran answered, and those Death Knights as well. Plus some orcs, though not many, he grinned. We've got them penned in. They'll never be going anywhere.
Turalyon glanced over at Danath, who nodded.
We laid siege to the temple as soon as we arrived, he explained. I didn't want to risk them getting reinforcements.
Good, Turalyon turned to the others. We need to get over there ourselves. Khadgar, you're the key here. We need you to take out Najul and stop his spell. Illyria, you and your rangers protect him from long-range attacks. Shoot down anything that even looks his way. I'll be right beside him to take care of anything close by. We smash through their defenses, find Najul, kill him, take back the artifacts, and get the hell out. Agreed?
Absolutely,
Khadgar agreed, and the others nodded as well. Good, Turalyon sighed and said a quick prayer, calling down the holy light's protection upon them all. He felt it pouring over them all, warm and calming, and thanked it. He clasped hands with Kurdran, Danath, and Khadgar, then turned to Illyria. She smiled bravely up at him, but she knew as he did the risks. Illyria. Thank the light they had not been so stupid as to still be shunning one another. Instead, they had found strength and comfort in each other. He folded her close for a long moment, resting his chin on her shining hair, then tilted her head up to kiss her. Pulling back, he gave her his best smile and hefted his hammer. Let's go. They charged across the valley, the remaining Alliance forces right behind them. Only a handful of men stayed behind to guard the camp. As they raced around the volcano, Turalyon saw the Black Temple for the first time, and only his faith kept him from jerking his horse to a stop and then kicking it into a gallop in any other direction. The place was enormous, towering over even the volcano jutting up from the valley floor. Carved of some stone that had perhaps once been bright but was now coated in ash and other foul substances that swallowed the light, it loomed like a piece of shadow given solid form, squat and ugly and dangerous, mocking the army that threw itself against its walls. Turalyon could tell that every surface was heavily carved, though he could not make out details yet, and the top of the central portion had protrusions that reminded him of a hand grasping at the sky. Even as Turalyon tried to take it all in, his horses stumbled and he was nearly thrown as the earth rocked beneath him. Lightning, green and loud and ominous and crackling with darkness instead of illumination, shattered the skies. His horse whickered in terror and reared. Its rider was only marginally less frightened, but did his best to calm the animal. What's going on? He shouted to Khadgar over the roll of thunder. The skies are right, Khadgar shouted back. I fear that... His words were snatched away as the earth shook again and the skies flashed green. Turalyon saw another flash and his head whipped up. The portion that evoked the image of a hand reaching for the skies, it was glowing. I think that's the hand of Gul'dan. Oh no, he breathed and turned to Khadgar. I was right, Khadgar yelled. Ner'zhul has begun his spell. Can we still stop him? I can, Khadgar answered grimly. Just get me there in time. Consider it done. Turalyon raised his hammer high overhead and summoned his faith, channeling it into the blessed weapon. The hammer's surface began to glow, the light spreading as it grew until it shone so brilliantly the volcano dimmed alongside it. The orcs and death knights battling before the Black Temple turned away blinded, but the light did not sear Alliance eyes, and his soldiers cheered as Turalyon galloped past them, his hammer burning a path through the temple's defenders, until one figure stepped out into his path.
Your little light does not frighten me, Teron Gorefiend called out, a jeweled truncheon in his hand. It was obvious to anyone with eyes that the Death Knight was lying. He had let his hood fall back, and his hideous, decaying face and burning red eyes were plainly visible. That face was contorted with pain, and the body strained as if wanting to flee of its own accord. Gorefiend lifted the strange weapon he held. It glowed with a multicolored light, and that varied radiance battered at Turalyon's glow, attempting to overpower it. The holy light is all that you are not, monster, Turalyon shouted in reply, pointing the hammer at Gorefiend and loosing a burst of light like a missile. If you do not fear it, then embrace it. The burst struck Gorefiend, but he swept his truncheon before him and it scattered Turalyon's attack, diffusing the brilliant white into rays of color. Then the Death Knight struck in turn. He leveled his truncheon at Turalyon, and a shadow emerged from its tip, engulfing the Alliance commander. Turalyon felt the darkness constrict, smothering his light and his limbs simultaneously, and fought against it, writhing to break free. Air passed beneath him, and he hit the ground hard, rolling and struggling. Clearly the attack had carried him from his horse, but the darkness stayed on him, pressing him down into the earth. He gasped for air, but his lungs refused to inflate, refused to obey his commands. He'd fallen. Of
Course he had. He was not even good enough to stay atop his horse. What kind of general was he? His troops would die too. He'd led them straight to their deaths. Lothar would be so ashamed of him. Turalyon spasmed on the earth, willing himself to breathe, but tendrils of darkness wrapped around his chest, crushing it. Snake-like, they wound up around him, pinning his arms to his sides, forcing their way into his mouth, his nostrils, his eyes. It burned. Tears spilled from tightly closed lids, but only inflamed the fire. And so he would die. A failure. A catastrophe. All those deaths would be on his head. Those innocents in other worlds gaping in horror as the vast green tide swept over them. The men who had believed him when he told them the light would be with them. Light. What light? Where was it now that it mattered? Illyria. Dead, too, she would be, joining her family, cursing him in whatever afterlife the elves believed in. She never loved him, he saw that now. He was a toy, one she would have outlived, one she'd have moved on from. Khadgar, Kurdran, Danath. The dark tendrils tightened. Turalyon opened his eyes, staring blankly. I'm sorry, Lothar. I failed you. I'm not you. I led them. He blinked. He led them the best he'd known how. No, he wasn't Anduin Lothar, the Lion of Azeroth. Only Lothar could be Lothar. It would be the height of arrogance to assume otherwise. He was Turalyon, and the light was with him. It hadn't failed him yet, not when he had prayed with his whole heart. Just ask. All you have to do is ask with a pure heart. That's why Lothar picked you. Not because he thought you'd be him, because he knew you'd be you. Turalyon took a shallow breath, constrained by the dark tendrils, and prayed. He opened his eyes, and he knew without understanding how he knew that they were shining with pure white radiance. He looked down at the tendrils of darkness, and they melted, retreated as shadows must ever retreat before the light. His chest heaved with a great breath, and he clambered to his feet and grabbed his hammer, swinging it through what remained of the shadows. The attack had lasted only a few seconds, though it had felt like an eternity. Gorefiend had used the diversion to creep closer, and when Turalyon could see and move freely again, he realized the Death Knight was only a few feet away. His red eyes widened as Turalyon took a step forward. Clearly he had not expected the young Alliance commander to win free so quickly, if at all, and he was not prepared for the heavy blow Turalyon's hammer struck him full in the chest. Turalyon was sure he heard bones snap beneath the worn armor, and the Death Knight stumbled back, though he did not fall.
You cannot win,
Gorefiend hissed through gritted teeth.
I am already dead. What is the worst you could do to me?
His truncheon jabbed forward, catching Turalyon in the stomach and doubling him over, and Gorefiend's hand brushed the back of Turalyon's helm. Instantly pain blossomed in Turalyon's head, as if a vice had gripped his helm and was squeezing it tight onto his temples and skull. Stars exploded behind his eyes, and he felt the world tilt crazily around him. In desperation, he swung his hammer again, a mighty two-handed arc, and felt the heavy hand strike something solid. There was a rattle and a gasp, and the pain vanished. Blinking away spots and taking a deep, racking breath to clear his head, Turalyon glanced up in time to see Gorefiend stagger a step, one arm hanging limp. While the Death Knight was off balance, Turalyon lurched forward, hammer raised high. He summoned his faith to him again, and the radiance shone from his limbs and from his weapon, too bright to look upon as he advanced upon his foe. The Death Knight cried out, raising his hands to shield his eyes from the radiance, which was now actually starting to make his flesh smoke and curl.
By the light!
Turalyon cried, praise, prayer, and promise all in one. I like that alliteration there. The light flared brightly, so brightly as he brought the hammer down, it did more than simply crush the reanimated body. It cleaved through it, the light carving an arc through Teron Gorefiend, ripping through him until the dead flesh fell in a soggy, reeking heap. A horrible wailing pierced Turalyon's ears, and he staggered back, staring in horror and disbelief as the jagged, shrieking wisp that was Teron Gorefiend's soul twisted upward from the wreckage of his body. The paladin lifted the glowing hammer and swung once more, but he was a fraction of a second too late, and the spirit was gone, shrieking in pain and frustration, fleeing into the crackling green and black sky. Yeah, and if you've ever played the Death Knight intro campaign, they talk about how they will always just reincarnate when they die. They can't. I mean, there's probably a way to truly kill them, but it's pretty difficult. As he said, he was a second too late. There's probably some way, but he's not truly dead. "Come on," came Illyria's voice, startling Turalyon. His heart swelled to see her. He quickly leaped atop his horse and galloped toward her. Riding ahead of them was Khadgar, and they caught up quickly. The Death Knight had been the temple's last barrier. Now they were within the Black Temple itself, and faced the long stairs winding up toward the top and the sickly light that pulsed forth from that height. Illyria, Khadgar, Danath, Kurdran. Damn it, they were not going to die here. With a physical shake of his head, Turalyon dispelled the last of the shadow's hold on him, gripped his hammer, and rode toward his destiny. All right, so I think we're not fully done with the Black Temple, obviously. So this is probably a 2-part chapter, so we'll have to continue that one next time. But that was cool. We had a showdown with Turalyon and Teron Gorefiend, and we're primed for kind of a big climactic moment. All right, this episode in the pipe, 5x5. I thank everybody for listening. Hopefully you enjoyed it. See everybody next time on Lore of Warcraft.